Hey everyone in 1301. I just wanted to take some time to talk you through and explain the reading journal assignment, which is going to kick off this week. So make sure you watch this and also look at the materials that I reference when you have a moment. So the first thing I'll do is pull up the reading journal assignment kind of guidelines. These are posted on D2L in the content area as well as the week 3 area, right? Since week 1 and 2 are combined, we're into week 3. So I really do want you to take some time to just slowly read through this, develop any questions you might have. If you have questions, really consider posting them in the Q&A section of D2L. I'm not going to read it word for word, but I'm just going to kind of jump around. The goal is for you to kind of keep some sort of running document of everything that we read. Don't be overwhelmed by this. I'm not asking you for 20 pages of a journal for each writing. I have some very focused areas I want you to spend your time on with each of those readings. And really this is to encourage you to make sure that you're actively engaging. A lot of times, and I think I note this somewhere, we read, especially for academia, just to finish, right? So we have this notion of, okay, I have the reading for biology, I need to get through that. Then I have my reading for English, I need to get, so we have these readings that we need to check off a list. And so sometimes that leads to us just kind of, without even thinking about some of the things we're reading, we're just flipping through the pages so that we can check that off and move on to the next assignment. So this is to encourage us to be a little bit more involved, a little bit more present in the ways that we read, okay? So beginning this week, I am going to ask you to keep that journal, and it is to show that you have read, but it's also to kind of push you to do that active reading, that engaged reading, and to think critically about some of the ideas within the different kinds of texts, right? So some of our texts are, as you've seen, focused on the act of writing, ideas behind writing. It's reading about writing, so that we can then put some of those ideas into practice in our own approach to the writing process. But then we need to kind of do something with that. So in addition to those readings, we're also going to read around a particular theme or topic. And for this semester, we're going to focus on food, mostly because it's just a very approachable topic that we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form. I'm pretty sure we all eat, right? And a lot of us have, a different kind of connection to food, whether it is cultural, national, communal, regional. We are all, we have our own stories when it comes to food, right? So it's a great topic for us to share those experiences and ideas. So I want you to think about the fact that we do reading that is about the writing, and then we're also going to do reading about food, so that then we can take all those readings about writing and put them into, into practice with our writing about food specifically. And as I say here, this is going to make sense as we start moving through. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by how much information we're going through. So I want you to start by reading the text in whatever way works for you. Okay, so this is really important. I need you to really identify what the best method is for you as a reader. A lot of us, again, because we're just checking things off a list, we're just going to read. We're going to sit with our text in front of us or up on the screen if we have the e-version, and we're just going to read. That's not actively engaging, right? So I want you to start thinking about, do you need to take a few notes here and there? Do you have a separate notebook? If you have the print copy of the book, are you taking notes in the book? Are you highlighting? I've had a lot of students in the past use Post-its, right? So because of, the idea of reselling books and wanting to get your money's worth, you may not want to write and mark up in your course text. So sometimes Post-its can serve a couple of different functions. It doesn't mess up your book, but they also, can be colorful. They can stand out on the page. You can have them set up as tabs on different pages with your ideas. So you need to kind of focus on the different ways that you read, because this assignment will kind of be a struggle if you don't have some sort of step in place. You don't want to sit with the reading in front of you and then start your journal. You want to read, you want to engage with that reading, and then go back and pull some of those ideas to finish your journal. Okay, just some things to keep in mind. So for each entry, You'll need, for each reading, you'll need a separate entry, right? So that's how I can go back and grade it, but also how you can organize your ideas. So to give you an example, this week we are reading Irvin's text, What is Academic Writing? We're also reading a section from our course book. So I don't want all of those entries and ideas to just run together, so I want separate entries for each of your reading, okay? So right here I've noted each entry should include the text title and the author's name. And I've put here, for our textbook, let's just give credit to the editors in general, but to Andrea Lunsford primarily because she is the lead editor. She's one of the big bosses, right? And so we'll push more on the idea of MLA behind some of this later. We want to just start slowly. And so part of that is making sure that we have our text title in quotation marks, whether it is an article or a chapter. Those are both referenced the same way according to MLA guidelines with quotation marks. So you want to make sure you're doing that correctly. And it allows that title to stand out on the page for any of your audience. So I'm your audience for this kind of assignment, but in the future you want to make sure that any titles, they're either in italics or in quotation marks. That's the typical, those are the typical ways to reference titles, okay? So we want to make sure also that you're giving those authors or editors credit throughout the entry, and you'll see what I mean in just a few moments, okay? So below the text title and author, you're going to provide what we call a summary and response, and it's just like it sounds, right? So in a paragraph or two, remember for this class, a paragraph is going to tend to be about 6 to 7 sentences. I'm not going to go through and count your sentences, but I am going to be very aware if you only have 1 or 2 or even 3 sentences per paragraph, because that just means you're not getting enough information in there. Shoot for about 6 to 7 sentences. You're going to summarize the ideas presented by the author. Okay, so the question you want to ask yourself is, what's the point? What is the overall idea of, Lunsford's chapter this week or Irvin's article overall? That's a really good starting point for summarizing, right? For this section, you should be technical, and I'm saying no opinions, no assertions or assumptions. Sometimes I have students who want to say things like, it was really well written and it was easy for me to read. I get that, but for a summary, you don't want to include yourself. This is you just very, professionally and in a withdrawn almost kind of way. You're taking a step back and you're just presenting the facts, okay? No opinions or assertions. So you want to just strictly identify the author's main ideas or arguments, okay? You also want to consider things like, who's the audience? Okay, our textbook has a particular audience in mind. We are members of those audience. And then the different things that we read are going to have different kinds of audiences, which means they are written in different ways. So identifying an audience is going to be very helpful to summarize. So refer to the author repeatedly. This is just a good practice for us to make sure that we're giving credit where that credit is due. We don't want to inadvertently take credit for somebody else's ideas. So if we refer to these people over and over again, that ensures that any reader can distinguish between what our ideas are as, the writer of whatever paper they're reading, or the ideas that we're using to support our own, okay? So in the second paragraph or two, you're then going to choose a key idea or concept. Okay, so this is where response gets into it. This is where you become a little bit more part of the conversation. So what interested you? But why? So don't just throw in all this information without really digging into the analysis, right? Critically thinking about why this is something that interested you, or was a new piece of information, or whatever the case may be. Why is this important? Okay, and then finally, you're going to choose a quote that is some way important or connected, right, to this section. Okay, so what you focus on in this section should be somehow connected to the quote. And so for one reason, this helps us kind of guide our reading and really critically engage with what we're reading. But in another sense, this is good practice for us down the line when we are trying to pull quotes from different sources to support our ideas. So this is getting us a little bit of that practice, okay? I want you to make sure you are very accurate. Make sure that word for word, your quote is correct. It is your responsibility as an ethical writer, an ethical reader and researcher to make sure that you're giving credit to proper sources and that you are accurately quoting, right? Because anytime you're using those quotation marks, the assumption is that it is word for word, okay? You want to be that trustworthy and ethical writer, okay? No mistakes. We want to follow MLA guidelines. And again, this is us just kind of dipping our toe in a conversation about MLA formatting, which again is Modern Language Association formatting. It's what we use in English courses. For other courses, it's going to be something like APA, the American Psychological Association. So different papers in different subject areas are going to have different, requirements. So in English courses, we follow a particular set of rules. In history, they follow a different set. In sciences, they follow, so it's a lot. It's overwhelming. When it comes down to it, it's kind of lame because it means you have to do a lot of work as a student to figure out how to write papers in different subjects. We'll get to those discussions later, and I want you to know that we have tutors available who can help with all of those different kinds of formatting styles, so something to keep in mind, okay? So you're going to use in-text citation format. Don't let that fool you. Don't let that scare you. It just means that you're going to follow MLA guidelines, and I have some examples to show you, so don't worry. After the quote, you're going to need to then explain why it's relevant. Don't just drop a quote and then expect me or any other person who's reading your ideas to understand why that's connected, okay? So again, this is pushing us to practice some of the things we're going to use later on, but also really pushing us to think about the text that we're reading, okay? I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and this is the grading rubric, which, y'all, it's really basic. It's really general because I am really looking at this as you get a check plus, right, which is in this column right here. You get a check, it's in this column, or you get a check minus, which can be, anywhere from a C to a 0, depending on the level of effort that you put in. So I want you to just think in those terms. I have information here for your summary, for your response, for your quote. We want to be sticking in this column, y'all, an A or a high B, right? For the summary, the writing reveals depth of understanding, engagement. Your summary is clear, concise, well written, and edited. Please, please. For writing classes, we really have to focus some on that, right? For the response, it's a bit of the same thing, but it's also adding that layer of, critical thinking. Your response is pushing ideas. It's striving to understand in more complex ways. It's not just a surface level kind of summary, right? And then the quote, it's present, it's accurate, it is properly cited, and your explanation is clear. I can see those connections that you're trying to make between the quote and your ideas, okay? Take some time to look over this. I'm going to scroll down now because I provided kind of an example template. This is in the overall assignment. I'm also supplying y'all a separate template that you should start using for your reading journal, okay? So don't use this, use the separate template, right? But this is using MLA formatting, so you'll note that there is a heading. So a heading that's required in MLA formatting. It is your name, your course information, and professor's name. Sometimes those are reversed. I don't really care. Don't worry about that. And then it's the due date, okay? So don't put the date that you worked on it. It's actually the due date. You'll have, your title here, and you'll change the week number depending on which assignment you're submitting. And then as an example, I've used Irvin's writing, right? So I've used quotation marks to indicate the title, and I've included the full name of the author. Double check spelling, double check everything, okay? Under this heading, I have a basic summary. I didn't write a complete summary because that's going to be your job, right? So I have the ellipses here saying, okay, you fill in some of this. Please don't copy and paste my ideas. Just use your own ideas. This is just an example. So there's a section for summary, and then there's also a section for that response, right? Where you are coming into the conversation and bringing your own ideas versus, again, the summary, it's just basic. Here is what the author is saying and arguing. And then we have the quote, and this is what I wanted to spend just a little bit of extra time on. So you'll see here I have word for word a quote by Irvin. You'll notice that I have quotation marks at the beginning, quotation marks at the end, and then to complete the in-text citation, I have Irvin's last name, space, page number, and those are in parentheses. And y'all, the period goes after the parentheses. This is something that students, a lot of times they're going to put the period right here. It's wonky, but MLA doesn't want that. They want the period here. You'll notice here in brackets, I put a few side notes for you just as reminders. And then here is the explanation, and then also some additional information here, okay? Here is the template. So essentially when you start your assignment, just go in and fill. just start typing here for your summary, type here for your response, type here for your quote. Here is a line to separate your entries, and I've just put in quite a few options. Remember to double click here to change your last name, and then enter, double click outside of there, enter here all your information. Okay, that's quick, but if you need some help, send me your questions.